It was a quiet Sunday morning in a small, safe town outside Albany, New York. Inside one house on a peaceful street, something had gone very wrong during the night. By the time anyone found out, one person was already dead. Another was barely alive. And the answer to what really happened would turn out to be stranger and darker than anyone could have guessed. If you like drifting off to stories like this one, slow, true, and a little unsettling, this is the kind of channel you might want to stick around for. Subscribe, hit the bell, and you will never miss a new story before bed. But for now, let's get back to it. On the night of November 14th, 2004, a yellow Jeep Wrangler pulled away from a college campus in Rochester, New York. Security cameras caught it, leaving around 10:30 at night. The Jeep belonged to a 21-year-old student. He was heading east toward the New York State Thruway. About 15 minutes later, a worker at a toll booth near Rochester saw that same yellow Jeep pass through. It was heading in the direction of Albany. Nobody at the toll booth thought anything of it. It was just another car on just another night. Almost 3 hours away in a quiet and comfortable suburb called Delmar, a family was asleep in their home. The house sat on a street called Brockley Drive. It was the kind of street where nothing bad ever seemed to happen. Neighbors knew each other. Lawns were tidy. It was the kind of place people moved to so they would feel safe. Inside that house lived Peter Porco and his wife, Joan. Peter was 52 years old. He worked as a law clerk at a court in Albany. That means he helped judges with legal paperwork and research. It was a steady, respected job. Joan was 54. She worked as a speech therapist, helping people with speech problems. They had 2 grown sons. One was away, serving as an officer in the United States Navy. The other was the student in Rochester, the one driving the yellow Jeep that night. At some point after midnight, someone reached the outside of the Porco house. First, they cut the telephone wire. This meant that if anyone inside tried to call for help using the home phone, the call would not go through. Then, at 14 minutes past 2 in the morning, the home security alarm was turned off. It was not broken. It was not smashed. It was disarmed using the correct code. Whoever turned it off knew the code by heart. At this point, investigators would later say nobody in that house understood what was about to happen. Peter and Joan were both asleep in their bed upstairs. Somewhere between 2:15 and 3 in the morning, someone entered their bedroom. They were holding an axe. It had been taken from the Porco property itself, from the garage or the porch. This was not a stranger who came prepared with a weapon from outside. This was someone who used what was already there. The attacker raised the axe again and again, striking Peter Porco at least 16 times in the head and face as he lay in bed. Joan was struck too. She was badly hurt. She would survive, but she would lose an eye and part of her face. For now, though, in the dark of that bedroom, nobody outside that house knew any of this had happened. What came next is the part of this story that investigators themselves found hard to believe, even after they saw the evidence with their own eyes. Peter Porco's skull had been shattered. His brain had suffered severe damage. Doctors would later say that injuries like his should have made a person collapse right away and never move again. But that is not what happened. Somehow, Peter Porco's body did what it had done every single morning for years. It followed its normal, everyday routine, all on its own, without him being aware of anything. He got out of bed. He walked into the bathroom, leaving blood on the sink and on the mirror. Then he went down the stairs. He walked into the kitchen. There, he seemed to prepare something to eat, as if getting ready for a normal day of work. Then he walked to the front door and stepped outside onto the porch to get the morning newspaper. He turned around, walked back inside, and closed the door behind him, just like he did every single morning of his life. Then, in the front hallway of his own house, Peter Porco collapsed. He never got back up. He bled to death right there close to the front door he had just walked through. Investigators would only piece this part together later once they found the long trail of blood that led from the bedroom, through the bathroom, down the stairs, into the kitchen, out to the front porch, and back again to the hallway where his body was found. At the time, nobody watching this unfold could explain how a man with such terrible injuries had been able to walk through his own house and go get the newspaper. It was one of the strangest and most disturbing details investigators had ever come across. Morning came, and Peter Porco did not show up for work at the courthouse in Albany. That was unusual. He was known as a reliable, punctual man. His coworkers began to worry. Eventually, someone called the police to check on the house. Officers from the Bethlehem Police Department were sent to Brockley Drive. Among them was a detective named Christopher Bowdish. When Bowdish and the other officers entered the house, they found Peter's body in the front hallway near the door. There was blood almost everywhere, upstairs and down, exactly along the path Peter had unknowingly walked that morning. Then, the officers found something else. Joan Porco was still alive. She was upstairs, badly wounded, but breathing. Detective Bowdish stayed with her as help was called. While he tried to keep her calm and comfortable, he asked her a simple, direct question. He asked her, "Did Christopher do this?" Joan Porco nodded her head. Yes. That single nod would become one of the most important and most debated pieces of evidence in the entire case. But at that moment, it was simply a badly injured woman, unable to speak clearly, answering a detective's question the only way she could. Christopher was the name of the Porco's younger son. The same son who owned a yellow Jeep Wrangler. The same Jeep that had driven away from a college campus in Rochester the night before and had been caught passing through a toll booth heading toward Albany. Police traveled to Rochester to speak with Christopher directly. He told them a simple story. He said he had spent the entire night on campus, asleep on a couch in his dorm building. Nothing unusual, he said. Just a normal night. But that story had problems. Classmates who saw him that week gave different accounts of his movements. And the security cameras on campus, along with the toll booth records, told a different story too, one that placed his Jeep on the road toward Albany that night and then back on campus again the next morning, sometime around 8:30. Investigators pulled the Jeep apart, almost piece by piece, searching for blood or any trace of DNA. They found none. Not one drop. If Christopher had done this, he had either been extremely careful, or he had somehow avoided leaving any trace inside his own vehicle. To some, this looked like proof he had nothing to do with it. To others, it looked like the work of someone who had planned carefully and cleaned up just as carefully. As detectives kept digging, they found something else that caught their attention. Money. Christopher had built up serious debt. He owed money on credit cards. His college costs were piling up, and at some point he had done something drastic to try to cover it. He had taken out a loan against his parents' house for $212,000, and to do it, he had forged his father's signature. Peter Porco had never agreed to that loan. He did not even know about it, not until he somehow found out shortly before he died. Investigators also learned that Christopher had been sending emails pretending to be his father to cover his tracks. So now there was a possible reason behind the attack: money, debt, and a father who may have just discovered his own son had been lying to him and forging his name. Still, at this stage, nobody outside the investigation could say for certain what had truly happened inside that house on Broccoli Drive in the middle of the night. There was a nod from a badly wounded woman. There was a Jeep on the road at the right time. There was a forged loan and a motive. But there was also a spotless vehicle with no blood and no DNA at all. The full picture, the one investigators would eventually put together and present in court, was still forming. Now let me walk you through what investigators eventually pieced together and what a jury would later decide after almost 2 years of work on this case. The trial did not happen in Del Mar. Because the case had received so much attention in local news, it was moved to a courthouse in Goshen, in Orange County, New York, further away from where the crime happened. The trial began on June 27, 2006. The prosecutor, a man named Michael McDermott, laid out the evidence piece by piece. The security footage from the Rochester campus, the toll booth records placing the yellow Jeep on the road that night, the forged loan documents, the angry, threatening emails sent from what looked like Peter's own account but were really written by his son. More than 260 photographs and diagrams were shown to the jury, laying out exactly what investigators had found inside the house. Christopher's defense lawyer, Terrence Kindlon, pushed back hard. He argued that Joan's nod, given while she was in terrible pain and barely conscious, could not be trusted as real proof. He pointed out, again and again, that there was no blood, no DNA, nothing physical connecting Christopher's Jeep or Christopher himself to the scene of the crime. At one point, frustrated by how much public attention the case had gotten, Kinlan said he could not even go to the supermarket without someone stopping him to share their opinion about the case. But in the end, the jury was convinced. On August 10, 2006, they found Christopher Porco guilty. Guilty of murdering his father. Guilty of attempting to murder his mother. On December 12th of that same year, Judge Jeffrey Berry handed down the sentence. Christopher Porco was sentenced to 50 years to life in prison. There is one more part of this story that many people find just as hard to accept as the crime itself. Joan Porco survived her injuries, but during her long recovery, she lost her memory of that entire night. She could not remember the attack. She could not remember nodding her head to Detective Bowdish's question. And despite everything, the evidence, the trial, the conviction, Joan Porco stood by her son. For years afterward, through appeal after appeal, she insisted that Christopher was innocent and that his conviction had been a terrible mistake. The house at 36 Broccoli Drive did not stay empty forever. After the trial ended, it was bought by a man named Michael Bueb, who renovated it and made it a home again, a quiet house on a quiet street, just like it had once been before that November night in 2004. It is strange to think about, isn't it? A man's body, so badly hurt that it could no longer truly protect him, still carried him through the small, ordinary steps of a morning he would never actually live to see. Sometimes, the most unsettling part of a tragedy isn't the violence itself. It's how much of it happens in complete silence, while the rest of the world is simply getting up, making coffee, and starting another ordinary day. That's all for tonight's story. Thank you for staying with me through it. If you enjoyed this one, take a look around the rest of the channel. There are more stories like it waiting for you, and more are on the way. If there's a case you would like me to cover next, or any thoughts about tonight's story, leave them down in the comments. I always read them. This has been Sleep to Stories. Good night, and sleep well.